Hey everyone, this is Homemaking with Rebecca, and today I'm going to show you how to make a basic sandwich bread recipe. So this recipe is just made with white flour and yeast, and it's going to take a couple hours to make. If you're new to getting started with bread, this is a great recipe to try. It makes great sandwiches and things like that. This recipe is from King Arthur Baking. So they have King Arthur has their brand of flour and stuff, and they have a lot of recipes, and it's just a basic sandwich bread recipe. The recipe that they have, it shows you different variations and stuff you can use. I'm going to be using butter today. If you don't want to have butter or you don't want to use butter, you can use oil. It's going to have milk, flour, sugar, salt, water, and yeast in it. And so I'm using this active dry yeast here today. So I'm going to put the link in the description below to that recipe, and they have a lot of variations. I think they even have that you can make it with like a bread machine if you want to. I don't use a bread machine, I never have. So, but it's just, I love that they've got the different variations and all the things in that. So one recipe of this is going to make one loaf of just this is a standard size loaf pan, so it's like 9x4 or something like that, and it's going to make one of these. So this is a stoneware one. I have metal, I have glass, I use different ones, but I like this one. And so we're going to double the recipe today, and I'm going to show you what it looks like in this, and then I want to show you how you can make smaller loaves. So this is a smaller size loaf pan. So if you don't have any of these and you're wanting to make some smaller ones, you can buy some of the little aluminum loaf pans, and you can use those a few times to make bread in those. Or you could just get you a set of these metal ones. These were actually my mom's. She made tons and tons of bread, and so I still have these from her. They're pretty worn, but for every loaf of big bread, you can make 3 loaves of these small bread. And so these make super great gifts to give to people. People love bread. And so you can give these out as teachers' gifts and things like that. It's nice to have them in these little small pans because you can make a whole bunch at one time. And if it's just for one person, it's not this huge big loaf, right? You could pair it with some jam or just another little thing to give to them. I have another video with candles and lip balms that will be great to pair with it as well. And so I'm going to just show you how easy it is to make this bread. So we're going to get started with our warm water here, and I'm just going to sprinkle my yeast over it, and that way the yeast can start getting dissolved in there and it can start getting activated. So we'll just leave that for about 3 to 5 minutes till it starts bubbling up and dissolving in there. And then we're going to put in the rest of our other ingredients. So we've got sugar, we've got milk. You want to make sure your milk is kind of room temperature. You don't want it super cold. And then we're going to put in salt and butter and our flour. So our flour here, I've measured out about 6 cups of flour or so. You want to have some extra on hand because it is likely that you will need to add some more in, just kind of depending on how your dough is doing that day. So I'm using my KitchenAid mixer here to mix all this up. It's going to mix the dough up with my dough hook, and then it's actually going to knead it as well. If you don't have a stand mixer like this, you can definitely do this by hand. It's just going to be a little bit more work for you. So what we're looking for here is we're wanting the dough to be all mixed up and just to not be too terribly sticky. I can already tell this is going to be a little bit sticky, so I'm just going to have to add in a little bit more flour. You don't want to overdo it by adding too much flour at one time, so you just want to do like a few tablespoons or so at a time, just kind of see how it is. I think this is the hardest part, honestly, of making bread, is trying to figure out how much flour to put in it, because it can vary depending on your humidity in your air and your flour and different things like that. So I like to sometimes scrape it down just so when I'm adding extra flour in there, it gets it kind of all mixed in. But you're just going to kind of knead that for about 5 or 10 minutes, and if it needs more flour, just go ahead and add a little bit more in. And what you want is you want it to be mostly pulling away from the sides of the bowl there and not to be sticking to the bottom too much. It can stick to the bottom just a little bit, but you can see here it's just kind of sticking to the bottom a whole lot. And what we want is we want it to kind of all be in a ball on that dough hook for the most part. So you don't want to get too much flour or your bread's going to be too dry, but if you don't have enough, it's just not going to rise quite as well. So that's what we're looking for there. We're going to keep kneading it, keep adding the flour as needed. And you can see right here, this looks really good. Sticking a little bit on the bottom, but the rest of that is pulling away from the sides of the bowl, so it looks great. So now that the dough is done kneading, I'm going to just scrape everything down off the dough hook and I'm going to get it ready to oil. And so I've got some olive oil. You can use whatever kind of oil you want. And I'm just going to kind of sprinkle it over the top of the dough here. And then I'm just going to kind of roll the dough around in it. And then we're going to cover this and let it rise for about an hour. And it will be pretty much doubled in about an hour. And that's what you want. All right, so the dough has risen an hour. You can tell that it is basically doubled in size. It looks great. It's nice and poofy. And so we're just going to get ready to shape it into some loaves. I'm going to get my pans all greased up here, and then I'm going to grease my baking mat there just so that I can work my dough on it and it won't stick. Now I'm just going to punch down this dough and I'm going to divide it into half, and that first half I'm going to make my big loaf out of that. So how I like to make my loaf is I'm just going to kind of flatten that dough out really good to get some of the air bubbles out. And then I like to fold mine over each other a couple times, and then I'll just roll it up nice and tight into a loaf. The main thing here is you're just wanting to get some of those bubbles and stuff out, and you want it tight so that there's not any big like air pockets in there that'll make holes in the loaf for when you cut it. So we're just going to let that rise for about an hour now, and then I'm going to show you these little loaves. So we're going to do 2 little loaves plain, and then this last one I'm going to do a cinnamon raisin bread. And you could do lots of different variations of this. I'm going to make mine just like I would like a cinnamon roll, except I'm going to put some raisins in there. So I'm just going to kind of flatten it out a little bit, and then I'm going to spread in some butter and some cinnamon and sugar and some raisins. But if you wanted to do like a jalapeno cheese bread, you could mix that in with this. You could do potentially like an herb bread with garlic and stuff like that. So you've got all different ways you can make this special and make it fun. Like I said, especially if you want to give it for gifts, that's a fun way to do it. So I'm just going to make a nice little rectangle here so that when I roll it up from the end, it's going to fit nicely into my little loaf pan there. And I'm just going to spread this butter on there. This is exactly like you would do if you were making cinnamon rolls. You do your butter, and then you put your brown sugar and cinnamon on and roll it up. And then we're just adding raisins today. If you don't like raisins, you don't have to add that. And you could also do this for a big loaf. It makes a nice big loaf of cinnamon raisin bread, and we're just going to get this on there and get it rolled up, and it's going to rise just like the other ones. We'll cook it just like the other ones, and then we'll get to see the swirl in the middle when it gets done. So I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit of cinnamon on top of this one just so I know which one it is. We're going to let these rise for about 45 minutes to an hour or so and get ready to bake. All right, these are all risen and they're ready to bake, and so we're going to bake them at about 350 for about 25 or so minutes for the little loaves, and then that bigger loaf is going to take about 40 or so minutes.
Now our little loaves are done and they're nice and browned on the top. And then I just kind of like to thump my loaves a little bit on the top, and usually if they have a nice hollow sound to them when you thump them, then you know they're good and done. And then we're going to let them sit for about 10 minutes or so, and then we're going to take them out of their pans and let them cool completely. So our bread is nice and cooled now, and I'm just going to slice into this cinnamon raisin loaf to show you how it looks. It's so pretty, it smells delicious, and it tastes really good too. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope it shows you how easy it is to make bread from scratch. If you try this recipe, I'd love for you to let me know in the comments down below. I hope you're having a great day. Thanks so much for watching.